It is the Everton Byline. We are back for episode 27, a little bit later than we would be usual, but transfer deadline day means very strange things happen, and very strange things happen certainly when it comes to Everton. So, Paddy, we didn't want to rush in last night, assuming the Carlos Alcaraz had signed, because it was looking a little bit like it was up in the air at one stage, but he is here. But we'll get into that in a bit. But first and foremost, how are you? You were up late last night, so I imagine you're a little bit tired.
Do you know what, Matt? We're recording on Tuesday afternoon, and I've spent most of the day thinking that it was Wednesday. So I think that probably gives you an idea as to my headspace. A just general sense of being after the late night on Monday. I was getting more and more frustrated the longer the Alcaraz delay went on. So I'm just thinking this is going to be another 12:30 deal sheet job, and we already had one with the last window with Armando Broja, of course. So I mean, certainly not doing things the easy way. If I had it my way, it would have been announced at 2:00, and I'd have been tucked up in bed by 10. But yeah, as we know with Everton, we don't get nice things all the time.
No, and there was a point last night where I just sort of thought, if this collapses, I'm just going to sort of embrace the comedy side of it, and just thought, these things are just going to be Everton forever. Like the sense of calamity is just going to be under our skin and under our fingernails, regardless of our manager, our owners, and all this. But thankfully, he is here, he is over the line, and he's an Everton player for the short term at least. We'll talk about that and a few other bits and pieces. But just before we start off, just a reminder, we are sponsored by the Bridewell. If you watch us on YouTube, you can see the logo in the top right-hand corner of your screen there. Well worth getting down there. As the nights start to get a little bit lighter and we head towards spring, just one other thing to mention as well today. I just wanted to give a shout out to our friend Laura Gates and her photo shop. It's lgatesphotoshop.com if you want to head over there. And we're doing a discount code through the Blue Room. If you want to head over there, you can get £5 off all your orders, £20 plus. So do go and check it out. I'll put the link on how to activate that description and the discounts in the description for the podcast. So do go check it out. It's lgatesphotoshop.com. You can get £5 off orders over £20 with the Blue Room. If you watch us on YouTube, do hit like, do hit subscribe, and leave a comment. Let us know your thoughts on all the chaos and all the controversy of the window. It'd be good to get people's thoughts, and the same applies if you're listening as well on Spotify, on iTunes, anywhere else. Do leave a rating, do leave a review, and do leave us a comment. So, yes, Paddy, let's get into it. Carlos Alcaraz was an Everton player on Friday night, wasn't he, according to Flamengo? So I think we all sort of assume that no issues were going to come across with this one. I think he had his medical on Sunday, we were told, so it felt like it was all going to be done. I think he had his media commitments fulfilled on Monday morning or Sunday afternoon after that medical. So, I mean, I don't know about you. When full disclosure, when we were sort of talking about recording, we were sort of saying, let's just do it at 11 o'clock when the deadline closes, because we're going to get Alcaraz announced early in the day. Probably not going to sign anyone else, so it's not going to be too late of a night for either of us, and we'll get it out on Tuesday morning as we would usually. And then, alas, I think it was about 10:15. I texted you last night saying, we're going to have to put this back, I think, aren't we? Because he's not here yet. And you told me that it's not done quite yet. So let's start there. Why did it take so long ultimately for Everton to get this one over the line and get the dreaded deal sheet out when his club seemed quite happy to announce on Friday that he was an Everton player?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing to say is that Flamengo were premature. Now, and I know people might debate that and dispute that. The player himself, even on social media, kind of said his goodbyes to the Flamengo fans, and that was Friday. At that stage, I think there was an agreement in principle, but what that needed still was for paperwork to be filed, for Alcaraz to fly over from Brazil to Merseyside for a medical, to have the medical, to do his media, all that kind of stuff. So there was still quite a long way to go. And probably in truth, I mean, from my perspective, odd, that Flamengo effectively broke the story on Friday. That's unusual for a club to do that before media or anybody else. I've got wind of it. And then B, unusual that it took this amount of time, I think, as well. Probably if you told me on Saturday, I did a story on Saturday saying this is progressing, this should happen now. And he's on his way this weekend for a medical that'll take place later in the weekend. If you told me then on Saturday that he still wouldn't be an Everton player at 11 o'clock on Monday, I honestly wouldn't have believed you. But probably most people, even inside the club, wouldn't have believed you at that point. I mean, so much goes on with these transfers, and I've seen an awful lot on social media since, looking to, I suppose, pinpoint what's happened and in some cases apportion blame. The first thing is he's an Everton player, by the way, so I don't know if we necessarily need to do the blame game. If he doesn't sign, another matter entirely, of course. But you're working across continents in different time zones with paperwork to be completed at both ends. And our understanding of the situation was that basically it was all done and dusted on Monday, more or less. But Everton's comms team didn't have that final approval, that final proof that the transaction was 100% complete. And the hold up there, as we understand it, is that Flamenco are trying to take out insurance on the player, effectively to guard against injury, to guard against Alcaraz, touch wood, not doing another Mangala. And I think there, in those circumstances, let's say for argument's sake, he gets injured, he returns to Flamenco over the summer. The obligation to buy is not triggered because he's not hit the criteria for games. Who's responsible for paying him then? And that's when the assurance money would come in theory. So my understanding is that was the hold up before the deadline. And like I said to you, whatever it was, Matt, 10:15 on Monday, at that point, it still wasn't done. By my count, it probably went through within an hour of the deal sheet being filed. So just before 12, and then it was announced, 12:15 or so. So utterly mad, chaotic, late turn of events. And probably you look back and think, how did it actually come to that? It probably should have been done much, much earlier.
Yeah, it feels like, and I know what you're saying, there was a lot of anger directed towards Everton on Monday night. And I think you just get to that point that, supporters, have been there, you just get a bit anxious and you start to wonder what's going on. And I imagine for the people at the club who've been working on this, probably been working on it behind the scenes for a while, when they saw Flamengo announce this, there must have been a collective head in hands moment because of all what you just said there, in the sense that, it did go premature. Everyone all of a sudden gets very excited, and there's probably people there thinking there's, it's on its way, but there's a lot of work to do here. And I suppose that in turn then colours the next few days for what supporters expect. Don't I think, like you said, over the weekend, it felt like, he's going to do his medical Sunday. The announcement will be on Monday. And then when it doesn't get sorted straight away on Monday, it drags on a little bit further. People go back to what happened on Friday and go, well, his club have said it, what's going on? This must be Everton's fault and all that. And I suppose it's not always, and this isn't us sticking up for Everton by any means of saying that, they were done over a little bit by Flamengo, but I totally get what you're saying in terms of, this is not like doing a deal with a club in the Premier League or even, in Europe. There are loads of different factors to consider here. There are different confederations. And as well, in terms of going into the deal itself, Paddy, it sounds quite nuanced and complicated in regards to that fact that you said there in terms of insurance and who pays him if he gets injured and whatnot. But certainly around what needs to happen for this to become a permanent deal. I don't think we've got a specific number. Yeah, and I know. I can't remember the exact phrasing in your piece today, but it was sort of a substantial amount of
high threshold of Premier League start, and I would not. Everton like the player, and I think there's a chance he meets that threshold, certainly, and there's a chance that Everton sign him permanently. But I would not consider it a given, and I actually think that's why you see a difference in phrasing between Everton's statement confirming this and Flamenco's initial statement. Flamenco referred to it as an obligation to buy, so mandatory. And Everton's formulation was an option. Now, the difference there, in my opinion, they're both sort of correct, and I almost think it's an exercise in semantics. But basically, it's in Everton's control because they can choose how often Alcaraz starts Premier League games, and there's only a finite amount of Premier League games left. He's actually going to have to be selected in a fair few from the get-go for this appearance to be triggered, this appearance clause to be triggered, and the buy option to be triggered. I mean, full disclosure, Matt, like, we were talking about panic earlier from fans. I was panicking. And that's not because of anything I was being told. It was because I kept expecting it to be announced. And it wasn't. We knew how close it was. I never got a sense that this wasn't going to happen. But the longer it goes on, you're kind of going, like, in my head, I'm thinking to myself, I've written a full review on the window here on Monday, predicated on the fact that Alcaraz is the one and only signing under TFG and TFG's first window.
It'd be going to the same file as the Nuno Santo new Everton manager.
There you go. I mean, the graveyard of the graveyard for all the kind of the pieces that should have been but never were, I suppose. And I'm kind of running through all the scenarios, like that panic that fans have got, like, we're not going to get anyone in. I've got that, but I'm also thinking, what does this mean for my Tuesday? Because I'm not going to be able to write a piece like the one I've just written. It's going to have to be something completely different on how they failed to get anybody in and what happened with Alcaraz. So even I was like, I was panicking to some extent, and that wasn't based on any indication I had. I think everyone was confident this was going to happen at Everton and Flamenco player side. Just my own kind of irrational fears.
Oh, amazing. Yeah, I could see the panic growing with every message I sent to you last night in regards to
what?
that.
I was grumpy. I was grumpy, and I was getting grumpier.
So, like, say if that had have completely gone tits up in the end and they hadn't signed him, then, like, you must be that must be like such a tough situation to be in, because I imagine at that time of night as well. So say the hadn't have gone through, we probably would have found out about, like, what, 12:15 it was announced, so around the same time. Like, surely at that point, like, there's no agents awake, or no one really. There's not many people from the club who you could speak to, or people connected to the player who were up and about at that time. So you like, am I just one of them where you're sort of like, well, what do we do now in terms of stuff for the morning? Like, surely it just has to all be pushed back quite a lot.
Yeah, I mean, we had the piece that went out on Tuesday, the full review of the window that's now live on site. We had that saved as a draft, just for somebody to pull the trigger when we had confirmation on Alcaraz either way. I think what would have happened if that had fallen through is we would have pivoted slightly, and we would have done a very quick initial story saying this isn't happening, so people can read it first thing in the morning or late at night. And then we would have had to tweak the piece I'd already written to reflect the new information and kind of almost like flip it on its head a little bit. I mean, that would not have been a good Tuesday for me. So I kind of had a vested interest in this happening for that reason, just kind of in these. I mean, like, I was being told on Monday night, Matt, at kind of midnight, I was being told by people at work, if you want to go to bed, go to bed. You've been up since kind of 7:30 at work, 7:30, 8 o'clock, writing and doing stuff. Like, if we pick it up in the morning, then it's gone so late that we'll just do that. But, like, you've almost got to see it through, really. You've always got to go, like, is this happening? Yes or no? And then you'll cross every other bridge very early the next morning. Try to make sense of it.
I didn't see it through. I was in bed about 11 o'clock, I think. Well, 5 past 11, actually. Yeah, it's I was well away by the time Everton announced that. Just quickly then, before we move on to our second topic, we haven't actually talked about the player. The more I don't know if you're getting this as well, but, like, the more I read about him and the more I hear about him, it just, I don't want to put too much expectation on him or get too excited, but he just sounds really like Tim Cahill in the sense that technically maybe not the best, maybe his passing and his all-round game is still quite raw, but he, again, this is just from what I've seen on videos and what I've been able to accrue from speaking to people who've watched them at Southampton and overseas, is that he makes good runs into the box. He's quite decent in the air. And then obviously it's the passion and the fighting spirit and that attitude as well. And listen, if he goes on to be half the player that Cahill was for Everton, then he will be an amazing signing for us. But in my head, and having not seen loads of him and not really remember much of him when he was at Southampton, that's the kind of football I'm kind of imagining we're getting. Somebody who might get it in the pockets and stumble over the ball a little bit or play the wrong pass, but we'll just pop up in the box, pop around the box, chip in with the odd goal, and we'll battle and scrap and fight for everything.
Yeah, I think that's fair enough. But from what I've seen, a sort of another Decore type, bringing energy and hard work and tenacity, all those kind of quantities and qualities, but with maybe a bit more to his game in the final third. Like, go back over any highlights reel, particularly at Southampton, and he strikes the ball well, scores goals, strikes the ball well from distance. As I wrote today, Everton have tracked this player for a long time. They did look at him before Southampton when he was in Argentina. So it's got a pick going back quite a long period of time. And it is opportunism again. Alcaraz joined Flamenco over the summer as their record signing, but they are really blessed in forward positions, and he's not really been able to make the impression that many would have hoped. And I think this opportunity came to him late on with Everton, and certainly the player wanted to take that, wanted to come back to the Premier League. I think you're getting a raw player in some ways. I mean, like, he seems to have been around for quite a while when you consider he moved to Southampton incredibly young. He'd played in Argentina before that, had a loan at Juve, and then they did not activate a very high option to buy. And then he went to Flamenco from Southampton over the summer. But he's still only 22. He's still learning his trade. I mean, only the equivalent of a Yusuf Chamiti, really, in some ways. But has already been called up to the Argentina squad. Wasn't capped. Already called up, and has obviously made an impression both in the Premier League and the Championship. So I think it makes a lot of sense, particularly given Everton's pretty tight financial parameters right now. I'll go back. You mentioned the South American element there, I think, Matt, and that kind of fighting spirit. I'll go back to a conversation I had with Everton's former head of medical, Danny Donaghy, for The Athletic. And Danny's point, we were speaking about Richarlison and Yerry Mina and why they, particularly Richarlison, maybe more than any other Everton player in that squad, seem to resonate with the fans. And his point was, like, actually a lot of the South American lads do, because they're brought up. I mean, this is a generalization, so not every one of them, but Richarlison and Yerry Mina both came from really humble beginnings, working class suburbs. They had to fight for everything. And I think that's like, this is reductive. Goodison wants more than this, but I think Goodison wants people to fight for the badge, doesn't it? It wants people to show that they really care as a bare minimum. And if you do that, then you're afforded a bit more leeway than other maybe more gifted players who aren't seen to be trying quite as much. So I would, he is not Brazilian, but I would say the same goes for Argentinian players on the whole. And that's what Everton are getting. I think they're getting a scrapper who can play.
Yeah, and that's why, going back to Cahill, like, players like him and Richarlison were cherished so much because they kind of embody that spirit, don't they? Like, that's that Evertonian spirit. Like, that is what we're about. We're not about, as much as the school of science gets thrown around. Like, I've never really thought of Everton as being the purest club with the passion identity who get it down and play it out from the back. We are very much raw. We're not about technical ability. It's about direct football, being aggressive, fighting spirit, and yeah, hopefully this lad can bring a bit to it. Just very finally on this, Paddy, we sort of touched on the threshold that could be needed to make it permanent. So is the number I saw from some of the South American reports was 8 games, I think. And I don't know if that's like more or less. I think from the reports I've seen, they no one's really been able to put like a number on it. But do you think it's that, or is it in terms of like percentage of games he's available for, or is it nuanced in terms of if he's fit, or if he starts, if he comes off the bench, and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I can't profess to know all of the ins and outs of this, the intricacies of the deal, and I kind of think that if anyone pretends they do, they're a bit of a snake oil salesman, because clubs don't give out all of this information. I mean, my understanding, it's a high threshold of starts, and I don't think it's a percentage. I think it's a number. I think it's Everton have got 15 games left. Like, we haven't put a number on it, and most others haven't. But I don't think you're going to go too far wrong with 8. I don't think it's spot on, but I don't think you go too far wrong.
Yeah, like high threshold would indicate more than half, wouldn't it? Like if we're gonna like delve into the semantics of that, like you can't have a high threshold of games be more like, 5 out of 15 or whatever it is starting that. Like,
that's not a high threshold of games.
Yeah,
3
it's
out
got to
of
be.
3 out of 15 is not a high threshold, is it? It's a decent chunk of games that he needs to play.
Yeah. All right. Let's move on to the second part then, and just sort of broaden this out a little bit and look at the window of it as a whole. And I think we knew, didn't we, that they were looking for a centre forward in the last few days. Obviously, a wide player was the priority maybe at the start of the window, and they were also potentially in the market for a fullback as well. Obviously, none of those came in the end, despite efforts and links to players like Chilwell. Evan Ferguson was mentioned quite a lot as well. But obviously, he's gone to West Ham. In terms of the window overall, like, I know some people were pretty unhappy that we didn't get a centre forward in the end. I'm relatively content with it personally, and I think David Moyes has saved the freaking group a very, very difficult decision in the last few days of this window, because I think if Everton had won 1 of the last 3 or taken 4 points from the last 3, and you'd be looking at that table and thinking it is still a bit too close for comfort. We might have to take a gamble here and then leave ourselves a bit short in the summer when the big rebuild comes. And I think it is a tiny bit of a risk, but I also think that for Everton to get out from under this PSR mess, at some point they're going to have to take a bit of a measured risk. And if we can get to the summer and sort of wipe the decks clean, so to speak, we're not going to be able to spend loads of money as much as we want, obviously, but we can get to a much better position in terms of PSR and sort out all those contracts and bring in players that we need to bring in to fill different gaps in the squad. Then I think we'll look back at January and think, yeah, that was a smart thing to do. It's not the most exciting thing to do, and obviously we all get wrapped up in deadline day and seeing some clubs sign players and thinking, wouldn't mind Evan Ferguson, wouldn't mind player X, player Y. But it feels like one of those to me that come 6 months' time, when we look back on it, we'll say, yeah, that was the smart thing to do.
Yeah, I mean, I realise I'm saying this as a member of the media, but I think in general, like we've come to fetishize the transfer window and in particular transfers, and that's probably created a constant clamour from fans for new additions and like this kind of insatiable appetite, just more and more and more. Right, Alcaraz, we think's in the bag. What's coming next? And that's a natural way to be, by the way. I'm not knocking it, but what I'm saying is it's not always feasible or sustainable. Now, I think you're spot on in what you say about Moyes coming in early doors and maybe taking a little bit of risk out of the equation here for Everton. Like the last time I looked at Opta's stats, which, let's be honest, the club will be tracking in some way, shape or form. They had Everton at a 0.64% chance of being relegated this season. And that's on the basis that in the space of, 13 days, David Moyes won as many games as Sean Dyche managed in the rest of the season combined. Everton on 27 points. And you kind of look at that now with 15 games to play and think, even if they get to 35, in most seasons, that would be enough, maybe more than enough. Last season, it was 27, I think, with the low bar of Luton and a minus 33 goal difference. So it's not. So sometimes it's not as tough as people think. I mean, I've been having this debate with fans today on social media platforms, and I don't think the 40-point barometer stands anymore. I actually think, if anything, it keeps on lowering as the promoted teams get worse and worse. And it's probably somewhere closer to 30 right now. So this will have been in Everton's heads, it will have been in the Freakins' heads. When you put that together with the PSR situation, which, because of sustained heavy losses now over an extended period of time, means that Everton aren't going to have loads of wriggle room until July, effectively in the next PSR cycle. You can kind of see why Everton have kept their powder dry a little bit. I mean, it is a calculated risk purely because there is that still 0.64% chance as it is. which probably goes up a bit more if Everton pick up another couple of injuries. But in a way, I'm quite relieved to see owners and managers and others at the club behaving sensibly. Like if you look at like the lavish and often ridiculous early spending under Mashiri, that set the club back, in my opinion, about a decade. We, in theory, still haven't recovered from it now, based on PSR and everything else. So I don't think you can afford to make those mistakes again. You look at some of the really bad windows Everton have had. There was one under Sam Allardyce where they brought in Theo Walcott and Cenk Tosun for, 45, 50 million combined on wages in excess of 200k all in together. And think about what that did to for the financial health alone of the club. It is a calculated risk, but I think like the chance of this going wrong are very, very slim, as Opta suggests. So I don't mind too much. The acknowledgement here is that they are short in a few areas still, and they're going to need a little bit of luck with injuries and a couple of wins soon.
Yeah, and I think the encouraging thing for me with it as well is like, say if Beto was to get injured, which would obviously be a nightmare in the current situation, like I would back Moyes to be able to find a way through that more than his predecessor.
Yeah.
You know, we haven't got players this good now, don't get me wrong, but you know, I remember countless times going to watch Everton play Cahill and Fellaini up front, and you know, it wasn't ideal, but we did all right and got results and found a way through. And listen, we haven't got probably the depth of squad, or certainly as good as attacking midfielders as them, but I think Moyes has already shown with, you know, the way he's utilised Lindstrom and O'Brien, the way he's been able to get out of Beto and Garner, which we're going to come on to talk about later. He seems to me as somebody who's got that extra little bit of nuance and creativity that you know Dyche would have really struggled with. And I think the other thing as well, like, and this is going to be interesting to see how it plays out for me over the couple of months, is that you've got a situation there potentially if Everton did say they wants to get 2-3 players in yesterday, then who's making that decision? Because you know, as we've mentioned, Alcaraz is somebody that the club have been looking at for a while. So therefore, you would say that is somebody who Kevin Feltwell has largely been behind and looking at. And obviously, there was the photos of him with Alcaraz, wasn't there? Those quotes with Feltwell on the press release. So it feels like he's very much involved in that transfer. But then you could have a situation where if you sign 2 or 3 more of his targets and he leaves potentially at the end of the season, then you've got that crossover as well. And you've got this weird dynamic now where the transfer window is closed. And he's still here for potentially the next 6 months, either planning for the next person or planning for his own future. So I think with that sort of situation still unresolved, the idea of going out and spending more money on players that a director of football who might not be here for long wanted, or maybe the manager who's just come in and might not have had time or chance to fully assess those targets, may not be sure of it. It's not ideal as well. So it's taking that big deep breath, isn't it, before the summer? And I think that's maybe one of the things that's been a little bit overlooked. As much as we need players now, and the squad is short. Don't get me wrong. We've spoken about it a lot on this podcast, but the churn in the summer has got the potential to be enormous. Like we could be looking at 10 new players coming in easily if certain contracts aren't signed. So I think to be in the best possible place to build a new squad at a new stadium for a new era feels like the most important thing. So I'm quite content and quite happy, as much as don't mind the bit of drama on deadline day. I was quite content to see Everton sort of keep the powder dry yesterday. Let's talk about some football stuff anyway, because they did win 4-0 on Saturday. And success again for Moyes, albeit with 2 players that were forced to come into the team in James Garner and Beto. And I know you wanted to speak about Beto, and I sort of wanted to speak about Garner. So I'll sort of throw to you first, because you want to speak about Beto, having spoke to Beto after the game in the mix zone. I was speaking to my colleague at the Echo, Connor O'Neill, about this. He was also there on Saturday speaking to him. He told me that it was initially going to be Decore, wasn't it, who came out? But I don't know, it was Connor or you or anyone else, but sort of pushed to get Beto to come out, because he was very much the story. And he had some quite interesting things to say as well.
Yeah, I mean, just to recap for anybody that doesn't know, like Everton bring a player out to us, and they would normally suggest who that is. No,
So
no,
did
no.
you send the Corey back to the dressing room? Sorry, on the line with
No,
no talking to you.
that would have been cruel and probably unfair, given how well he played as well in the game, and particularly in scoring the first goal. The way it works is actually they split media duty. So I think Decore and Beto were both doing numerous things after the game, and Beto had already done quite a bit of TV, I believe. But between us as a collective, I think there was 3 or 4 of us there in the tunnel doing the interview. I think we collectively said that actually the story here really is Beto. He's the one you want to get quotes from. I mean, it's quite nice. Like the last time I actually spoke to Beto was after Seamus Coleman's own goal at Bournemouth last season. And obviously, he speaks perfectly good English, but at times the formulations are quite simplistic. So after that game at the Vitality, he'd scored what appeared to be a late level, and he's just talking about how sad he is. And I just remember thinking, like, this is just not nice. This is just like almost. I feel really sorry for the guy here that he's been deprived of his moment. But like flipping it on its head, Saturday was kind of his big moment to me. He was the last one off the pitch by my count at the end of the game. Kind of stayed at the end in front of the Gladys Street. You were probably there, Matt, in front of the Gladys Street, kind of basking in the adulation from fans, and lovely moment. You could see how pleased he was and how made up he was, and I find that like it can't be the only thing, is the players actually have to be good as well and follow through on that. But I find it quite endearing that it matters so much to him, and you can see that whenever he plays. The point I wanted to make, and it probably goes back to something you said about Moyes and being smart, but I think Beto has almost like been pigeonholed as a battering ram striker, as somebody who, a bit like Dom, holds off defenders and lays the ball off. And I don't think it's his game. Dyche used him that way, in a very direct way. I think he's clumsy sometimes in possession. He's got his flaws, and I don't think he's good at linking play at all. You don't want him coming towards the ball. But if you give him space and behind, he's an absolute pest in the nicest way possible, and can really cause problems. A little bit like Lukaku in his first stint at Everton. I always thought Lukaku at times was used in the wrong way and needed to be played in behind. Beto is exactly the same. And I think Moyes isn't as reliant on a target man as Dyche was, and is playing Beto in that way. I mean, like, look at his 2 goals. He runs onto a great curved ball from Tarkowski, doesn't have to take a touch, and just finishes it really well into the corner. And then for the second goal, again, doesn't have to take a touch from James Garner's pass, which is absolutely incredible, by the way. Absolutely loved it. And finishes there. So, like, he comes through to us at the end, and you can tell how much it means to him, and talking about how, like, the fans have always backed him, and how, like, he'd always believed he was a Premier League player, but he wanted a chance to show it. And I think we spoke a little bit after Calvert-Lewin's injury a few weeks ago, Matt, on this pod, saying that, like, it felt like almost like a final chance for him ahead of the summer to prove his worth. I still think that if Breuer and Calvert-Lewin had stayed fit, maybe he would have gone in January, because there was interest from Italy, and he certainly hasn't pulled up any trees here. But like, circumstances have kind of conspired. Dyche is gone. That system is gone. That tired system that made attacking players look worse than they were. And in its stead, you've got Moyes looking to really tap into his strengths and play the ball in behind. So, like, one swallow doesn't make a summer. Like, I'm pretty sure that he'll have worse days than that, and by quite some distance. But he's already scored as many goals as Calvert-Lewin this season. He's done so in about a fifth of the minute. So maybe he can be effective still.
Yeah, bad weekends for Dom and Dyche when it comes to stats, wasn't it? And players or managers matching their totals after considerably less amount of time. But just a couple of things on Beto, like, and the fan reaction to him. Like, I feel like I'm trying to find a nice way of saying this. I get this is going to sound harsh, but it's not how I mean it. Like, the reaction to him since Saturday, I think, has been the first time that it's been about him being a good player and doing really good things, as opposed to being a figure of fun and a bit of a joke, if you get what I mean. Like in the grammar, like, people chant for him. Like, you know, I've given him stick on this pod, and on Insta reactions loads of times when he's come on and not really looked up to it. And like when people chant his name, Beto, to come on, like people by us and like me and my dad will chant it and then go, oh, yeah, as if he's going to come on and do anything. Like, you know, he's a bit of a figure of fun, isn't he? He's always been that. And I think it was nice after the weekend. It wasn't like he's come on like against Fulham and he's just been a bit mad and put himself about and just got on the end of a cross and got a late equaliser for us. And obviously that was a great moment for him. But like after Saturday, it was like, look at these really good runs and like look at the composure and look at the way in which he bullied defenders and the way he linked up with James Garner. Like these are really good things. It was a really good all-round performance. And I think that's the first time he's probably had like that kind of reception. If you get what I mean. And the other thing I'd sort of say about him as well is that we've seen Calvert-Lewin in those positions plenty of times this season. And as much as Beto is a bit bumbling and clumsy and puts himself in mad positions at times and does charge around, like the second goal he scores in particular was like that. It's so composed, isn't it? Like it is just a pass into the back of the net, and like that aspect of his game just seems to be so at odds with everything else about it, which is so chaotic and so raw. When he seems to get on the end of those through balls, he just seems to find a bit of extra composure that the Calvert-Lewin doesn't have.
Yeah, I think both finishes are really composed and really effective. Obviously, like probably if you'd said to me before the game, Beto's going to get these 2 chances, how many is he going to score? I wouldn't have gone with 2, but I'd have probably said 1. And that's fine, by the way. Sometimes strikers miss chances, but they need to be in the positions to do so. And I think that's a good habit to have. And I think in the main, Beto does. Even like in some of his worst Everton appearances, he's always been there, and he's missed some sitters. But he's kind of being an agent of chaos, Matt, in a lot of these games as a late sub. I don't think he is a great substitute in some ways because he seems to take him ages to get up to the speed, and he kind of starts like there's always one moment in a game where you see him like going to stretch for a tackle, and you think, oh my god, like if he connects with this player, he's probably off. But confidence is an amazing thing in the sense that like almost from the point at which he scored the first goal, he goes through for the second, and you kind of think, yeah, he's going to bury this. So like, his track record is not amazing, but he was hitting double figures in successive seasons in Italy, and he did the same in Portugal. He hit double figures in Portugal for a lower ranked team. So he can finish and he can score goals. I just think it's taken Everton longer than it should have done to give him a run of games, to give him a run in the team, and also to play to his strengths. Like the fundamental mistake here is playing the long ball and thinking he'll be Calvert-Lewin, because he's not going to be. He never, ever will. But, I mean, like, credit to Moyes again for this. But I think he worked it out very quickly.
Yeah. And I think it is probably good for Beto as well that Garner came into the team at the same time, because as much as Mangala's been, neat and tidy player for us, I don't think he can play a pass like that, which Garner played on Saturday. And like, I've always been a bit puzzled by Garner. Like, I'm not gonna lie. I remember early at the start of last season, he was getting a lot of rave reviews. And like, I never quite got it. And the thing that's always frustrated me about him, Paddy, and I don't know if this is down to him, is that when we signed him and I looked at videos and analysis of him, like all the positive talk was about what he can do on the ball and his passing range and his free kicks and his long shots. And I just feel like that's not really been there at all in his Everton career. Like, I can't remember him having a shot at goal from distance, which has really troubled the keeper. He scored 1 goal for us, I think.
I mean,
he scored in the cup against Villa, was it? And that's it.
He scored against Bournemouth as well, didn't he? And that was probably until this season, that was probably his best performance in an Everton shirt, for my money.
He was good at Forest away, wasn't he, as well, when they won 1-0 last year?
He was very good at Forest away. I think like he's always been like a 6 out of 10 kind of type for me when I've seen him up to now, and a lot of that has been based on like pretty reliable set piece taker. I think his ball striking is a strength, and he always brought energy to Everton out of possession. But I almost never really knew where he like would fit into the team. Like he's neither like the one you want probably deepest in midfield, nor the one you want highest. kind of just does a little bit of everything. But I think we saw like his like real strengths on Saturday are when he picks his head up in space and can see runners. He can execute those passes, and like probably an open-ended question to you, Matt, but like that's the best pass from an Everton player I've seen in a long time. But like, since when?
You're going back to James Rodriguez, I think, aren't you? And some of his.
I think it's a better pass than the Liverpool one. But like, what makes James' one at Anfield is that he pulls it out to the sky, and the touch is just unbelievable. And then it's like kind of one fluid motion from where he pulls it down. But I think like this is a better pass because it travels further, and it kind of dissects two defenders. Like, honestly, I'm struggling to remember the last pass that was that good.
No, I would agree. Actually, like it is ridiculous, and like that's the thing that like almost sort of like has always annoyed me about him a little bit, because I think like he's got that energy, and I think whenever we've spoken about him, typically having a good game for Everton, it's been about his work rate and it hassling and like just being a bit of a pest. But I think when you go back to his Forest days and you look at what they said about him and why he was a good player, it was like, oh, he's a gem of a footballer. You know, he's got great footballing IQ and he can strike the ball really well. And we've not really seen that from him. And I think if he can just add a bit more of that, like he's not going to play pass like that every week. Don't get me wrong, but he played the pass through to better as well, didn't he? Which we should have had a penalty from. Which
that was a nailed-on penalty, by the way. Even though Dermot Gallagher. I've not seen Rep Watch, but I believe he said that it wasn't. So just
it was a bit of. I think it got to the point where Sue and Stephen Warnock were just laughing at him. But
I'm
like if you could just play a couple of passes like that, like penetrating passes into the box, like a game, I think it just takes him to a whole new level.
Yes.
And like I think playing a bit more on the ground will surely help him. And I think. Listen, it's early days, first game back, and Leicester were dreadful. But like him and Beto is going to make runs in behind, isn't he? And Garner has got the ability to find them. So that should, in theory, be a good link up. And I imagine for both of them, listen, we don't want Calvert-Lewin and Mangala to get injured, obviously, but it feels like both of them coming into the team at the same time is kind of going to help each other.
Yeah, I think Moyes is good for Garner as well, and probably good for Beto, given what he seems to have learned very early about both of those players. Garner's passing ability from deep and Beto's ability to run in behind. But I thought it was quite telling. I don't know if you've seen Garner's interview. I think it was with the club channel after the game. But effectively said, I kept looking for Beto because Beto was telling me in the week, when you see me make the run, pass to me, because I'll be in behind. And it's probably lacked. I mean, like, it's a really basic thing, but it's probably lacked that at times this season, hasn't it? Just somebody picking their head up and making that pass, trying to make that pass, executing it, and the run being made in behind. I mean, like, Calvert-Lewin probably would have been offside. He spent half his time offside, and to be fair, Beto can do at times. But I think they all help each other, Matt, and I think Moyes helps them too. So, like, to me, positive early signs, even though Leicester, as you rightly point out, were absolutely atrocious. I think that's the worst performance I've seen from a visiting side at Goodison for a long, long time.
I think Wolves might be just worse than them earlier this season, but I think we actually scored some good goals on Saturday, whereas Wolves just seemed to, like, the keeper seems to throw them in, or Craig Dawson seems to.
4-0 just happened against Wolves, didn't it?
Yeah. Like, all the goals in that game, like, now I think enough time has gone on to say all the goals in that game are pretty crap, really. Like, Young scored a free kick, which probably should have been saved. Like, they were just a mess, wasn't it? Like, it was a big win, but a bad 4-0 win if you can have one of them. But yeah, it's all good. 3 wins in a row. We've signed an Argentinian who's going to want to fight everybody for the rest of the season. Oops. So we are happy, albeit a little bit tired. Let's finish off, Paddy, with number 27. It's a good one. Obviously, we've got Idrissa Gueye at the moment since 2022. Stop me if you want to talk about any of these, because there's a few interesting characters in there. Moise Keane, obviously banging them in Italy at the moment, isn't he?
Did you see his goal at I don't know if it was at the weekend.
Yeah. Do you want to describe it to our listeners, for anyone who's not seen it?
Yeah, I mean, it's a flighted ball kind of into a central area in the box, and he's made a run, and he's kind of on his side, isn't he? And he kind of flicks it with the outside of his boot. It's a brilliant improvised finish. And he's doing really well this season. I think he's up to about 14 league goals already in a rejuvenated career, in a rejuvenated Fiorentina side. Probably a case of Everton finding a talented player, but him coming at the wrong time in his career, which is a familiar theme with Adamola Lookman and Nikola Vlasic and various others.
It's like an Everton Serie A dream team going on, isn't it, at the moment? Over there with Lookman as well.
It is. I mean, like, I do want to speak about Idrissa Gueye again because I still think it's ridiculous, like what he's doing as a 35-year-old. Like,
yeah,
like I think we've said before, Matt. Like the team could probably cope without Mangala, but I don't think it copes anywhere near as well without Idrissa Gueye. Given what he's doing, I think he almost gives James Garner a bit more of a platform. I'm also glad that you're listing off some of these because, like, I don't know what day it is. So the idea of knowing who Everton number 27s are right now is obviously
some brilliant ones here. So Nikola Vlasic, who I always quite liked, to the forgiver, he got a proper chance. Tyus Browning, who obviously put that cross in at Anfield that led to the Jagielka wonder goal all those years ago.
Chinese League winner Tyus Browning.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. Apostolos Velios and Lukas Jukovic both wore it, so it was the number for underperforming potential target men at one point.
Velios is Velios the one that fluffed the initial effort when Jelavic scored the winner against?
Yeah, he tried to overhead kick it, didn't he, from Gibson's cross, and it just sort of fell perfectly for Jelavic.
Well, that's the best fluffed overhead kick at Goodison I've ever seen.
It was brilliant. That was a great game. That absolutely loved that one. And we've also got Andy van der Meijden. I mean, we do a whole show on him. Peter Clark wore it 3 separate times: 03, 04, 01, 02, 99, 2000. He was a great affinity with the number 27 shirt. In between his first and second spells wearing it, David Carney wore it. I don't know who that is. And then Richard Dunn wore it between 96 and 99. I think he was quite highly rated when he was at Everton, wasn't he? Dunn. He was.
I mean,
really good.
Had a good career, didn't he?
Yeah, prolific own goal scorer.
Yeah, not at Everton. A bit clumsy at times. Was prone to own goals, was prone to red cards, was prone to giving away penalties, but had a good career and did well not only for Ireland but also for City for a long spell. I kind of remember him and Michael Ball breaking through at the same. That's the same era of Everton, isn't it? And
really fast for centre half, wasn't he? Remember him being rapid.
He was like, I imagine taking a tackle off him is like getting hit by a freight train.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, you would not, if you were ranking players, you'd want to take a tackle off. Richard Dunn would be very low down that list.
Yeah, absolutely, mate. There we go. There's number 27 done. We'll have 28 next week, which has got some more belters. Oh, I love doing these. There's definitely a show in this. We'll figure this out at some point. But yeah, we'll wrap it up there now anyway. Just a reminder, by the way, I know I plug a lot of stuff at the start. The code is TBR25. I should have said that. TBR25 on the website if you want to get access to that discount. And just one other thing as well before we wrap up. I wanted to give a shout out to Fiona, who anyone who drinks regularly in the Denby or the Bridewell will know she is doing a charity walk on Friday to raise money for Clatterbridge Cancer Charity. We'll put the link in the description for this podcast or video. If you want to donate, Fiona is amazing. And she's just finished the end of her own cancer treatment and is doing the night walk for Glowing Green to raise money for Clatterbridge Cancer. So do donate if you can to that for a wonderful cause. As ever, it's round sponsored by the Bridewell. If you watch us on YouTube, hit like, hit subscribe, leave us a comment. Let's make this a long-term thing with yourselves and the Everton Byline. It'd be wonderful as we carry on into what should be an exciting end to the season. And if you're listening to us as ever, do leave us a rating, do leave us a review, do comment if you're listening on Spotify as well. That is it from me. I'm sure Paddy will be off to bed, dreaming of Charlie Alcaraz long-range goals and fights. You're on mute, Paddy. I can tell you're tired. Sloppy this. Go on.
Yeah, I'll repeat it because nobody could actually hear what I was saying. I'm off to Walton Hall Park actually for Everton.
Amazing.
No,
there we
no
go.
rest for the wicked.
Absolutely not. So yeah, that should be interesting. But yeah, thanks to everyone for tuning in. Sorry it's a bit later than usual. We'll be back to the normal Tuesday morning next week. I'll be reflecting on that game against Bournemouth. Up the top east. Speak to you soon.